Hello, I'm Hannah, and this is Hannah's Books. Or rather, this is supposed to be Hannah's Books. To be honest, most of this video will not be about literature, but actually I think there will be bookish things mentioned here today. Mostly, though, it will be personal, just a family update. Last month, or a little more than a month ago, I guess, I posted a video saying that my husband had had a recurrence of his brain cancer and would need surgery. For those of you who are new, my spouse David was diagnosed with glioblastoma 4 years ago, a kind of cancer with an average prognosis of little more than a year. How amazing that we've had all this unexpected time to enjoy our lives together. Well, I filmed that update video a couple of days before he was to be hospitalized, but the video really needed a bit of editing. Lots of long, silent pauses as I thought about what to say and what not to say. And honestly, I couldn't bring myself to spend time doing things like editing a video at a time when I wanted and needed to spend my time with David. Shortly after I filmed, David was, in fact, admitted to the hospital with plans that he would have surgery the next day. In this video today, I want to share with you just a bit about his amazing facility, which is an unusual place, at least in the U.S. David is a patient at NIH, the National Institutes of Health, which provides care for people all over the world, actually, who have relatively rare or relatively serious conditions. Much of their work is not inpatient hospital-based, a lot of work at NIH that isn't even about direct patient care at all. This is a research facility with the goal of learning more about how healthcare can work, and there are labs and scientists all over campus. 4 years ago, right after David was diagnosed with glioblastoma, he was admitted to the clinical center for his brain surgery. Amazingly and wonderfully, I was able to spend almost every night with him during his long stay, including having the opportunity to sleep in his ICU room immediately after his surgery, in a recliner in the back corner of the room. Given the horrendous diagnosis, David was incredibly fortunate. In addition to getting wonderful health care, David's tumor had a genetic profile that made it susceptible to radiation and chemotherapy. That methylation, as it's called, almost certainly contributed to the almost 4 years he's lived with only minor effects of the cancer. But early in the summer, he and I both realized that his very minor issues with his foot were beginning to get worse. He talked to his neuro-oncologist and got an MRI a bit ahead of schedule, and the tumor was back. The treatment plan was surgery, then analysis of the removed tissue to see if those lucky methylation genetics held true for the new tumor. He was admitted to the clinical center at the end of June, and amazingly and wonderfully, NIH let me stay with him for his whole hospitalization, again this time. In fact, they technically admitted me this time. Following COVID protocols, I was not allowed to leave the campus. And because of those COVID protocols, patients no longer share rooms with other patients, so David and I were given a double room. And instead of sleeping on a pull-out chair like I did last time, on this visit I got my very own tricked-out hospital bed. After we moved in, we instantly took a short walk down the 7th floor hall to the patient library. What could be better than a hospital with a patient library, especially when it's just steps from your hospital room? Let me show you around a bit. The library is not enormous by public library standards, I guess, but it's quite a nice-sized room. There's a nice little children's section for pediatric patients, but also for the children of adult patients, as well as a small collection of books written in other languages. But no surprise, we spent most of our time in the English language section of books written for adults. There's a limited selection of classics, including Shakespeare, and classic English verse, Jane Austen, the Brontes, and some great art books. Although there isn't a specific section for them, there is, not surprisingly, a great selection of books about illness and grief scattered throughout in alphabetical order. I found some of my favorites on the shelves, including Michelle Zauner's Crying in H Mart, Tim Belloch's From Scratch, Nina Rigg's amazing Bright Hour, and Paul Kalanithe's magical When Breath Becomes Air. I was thrilled to see that near Kalanithe was Helen Keller, the person who first introduced me to more complicated ideas about disability back when I was in first or second grade. I also loved running across some other books that had special resonances for me. This shelf, starting with Catherine Mannix's book on hospice, Isabel Wilkerson's Warmth of Other Suns, Paulina Brand's The Barbizon, which was one of the first books I reviewed in print for a paying venue, and on and on. Then there is Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson, an inspiring and thoughtful book I listened to with David when we were on a long car trip. And best of all, Barracoon by Zora Neale Hurston, with an introduction by Alice Walker. That book came out the week David was hospitalized last time, and while my local public library did not yet have a copy, NIH did, and I read it while David was in the intensive care unit. At the end of this video, I will read out a paragraph or so from Alice Walker's intro. I can't right now because it will make me cry, and I won't get through the rest of this filming. I picked up a handful of books this time, as did David, to add to the huge stack of books we'd already brought with us. And I took a picture of a couple of others that I wanted to pick up the next time we dropped in. Patrick Taylor's Irish Country Doctor series, which sounds gentle and calming and perfect for hospital reading. And Elizabeth Strout's novels, which are some of David's favorites, but I've still never read. Well, we checked out an armload of books, realizing that if surgery was anything like last time, we might be hospital residents for quite a while. David's surgery was planned for the next morning, a Friday, but in the late afternoon, one of the neurosurgeons came in to tell us that, wildly, in the serious rainstorm that our area had experienced a day or two before, the operating room had flooded. And now they'd found mold growing in the OR. We did not foresee that. Still, the idea of opening up a person's head and exposing their brain to moldy air sounded like a bad idea, so we were willing to wait. They said the cleanup team were going to work throughout the weekend, and then the epidemiologist would check to make sure everything was okay for them to reopen the suite of operating rooms. They were hoping for Tuesday and Monday if they were really lucky. Because of the aggressiveness of David's tumor growth, he was on the top of the list. The medical team and the nursing staff suggested we might stay in our hospital room over the weekend, which would mean we wouldn't have to go through all the admittance procedures and COVID testing, etc., a second time just 2 days later. We decided to take them up on the offer and to try to use our time as well as we could. And here is where things get interesting. We decided to turn the weekend into a writing retreat, and it was glorious. Yes, David and I are writing a book together right now, and are, because of the circumstances, under a bit of time pressure. Sometime soon, I'll talk more about our project and also fill you in on some very exciting news about it. But for now, let me tell you that we wrote a ton and focused really well together at the National Institute of Health Writers in Residency program, which we created for ourselves. The sunlight coming through our rooms, I guess I should say our studio's large plate glass window, was lovely. The air conditioning was glorious. and the staff brought us food and drink whenever we wanted, including these personalized mugs. Well, I would not have chosen to personalize them in precisely this way, but we appreciated the attention. In addition to riding together, we walked around the enormous hospital, almost empty during the weekend. At the core of the patient side of the building is a large atrium going up about 7 stories. If you're on those floors above, you can walk in a loop around the part above the atrium. That's where we took our daily walks. And on the short ends of those ovals are various facilities, including the patient units and that amazing patient library, as well as a chapel, muscle purification rooms, a meditation area, etc. In the spots without huge plate glass windows and views, there's really interesting stuff on the walls. One of my favorite pieces of art shows a variety of people wearing beautiful masks and was made at the very start of the pandemic by one of the physician researchers at NIH. David and I remember a piece from before times with a variety of faces quite similar to this picture, but without masks. When we first saw this new one, we thought someone had restructured it, cutting out paper or cloth masks to put on the older art. I don't think that's what happened, but I still love the echo of the old art. There's a lot of other fabulous art, from rotating displays by contemporary artists to interesting historical architectural features, like these amazing elevator doors. In a less traveled hallway, there's quite a bit of other NIH history too. I love the small display about what the experience was like for the children who grew up living on the campus back when it was fairly new. I love the Girl Scout hat and the clip-on skates, the tea set, and the wooden dog you could take for a walk. There was also a whole set of pieces of artwork created to accompany lectures given by medical researchers to a wide audience, to the general public. There was a set about osteoporosis, which I thought were adorable. And then I ran across this set from a lecture given back in 1984 about AIDS. That last picture, with so many people just outlines, is gutting. If you're from the U.S., or if you follow American health news fairly closely, you may know who one of the big NIH AIDS researchers was in the early 80s. Yes, Anthony Fauci, who came to fame again during the COVID pandemic. He gave this lecture. And while this plaque is in an out-of-the-way spot, there are plenty of more public places recognizing him. You can see art, a children's book in the little bookstore, and even a bobblehead doll. If you hang around enough, you might even see Fauci himself in the flesh walking in the hallways. I'm pretty sure I did one day. I assume his work does not bring him to the clinical center often. NIH is a large complex with many buildings and large grounds, but I'm pretty sure that was him. Masks make it a little hard to tell sometimes. Another big name from NIH is Francis Collins, who was the head of NIH for many years, as well as a spokesman of a sort for people who are both scientists and religious believers. He has now retired, but I think it might have been him in the clinical center one day playing the piano in the atrium.
Up until this point, covering, it just is what it is. We don't have anything to offer. We don't have.
In addition to our time exploring the building, we spent quite a bit of time walking around the outdoor courtyards on either side of the atrium. They're paved paths surrounded by labeled greenery, and there are also places to sit and enjoy coffee and our special NIH treat, almond croissants. One day we shared a bit with some of the local wildlife. after our writing retreat wound down and David was relegated to full-fledged patient again, we received confirmation that the operating rooms were in good shape again and that he would be taken back for surgery on Monday morning. While the tumor resection was going on, I headed back to the courtyard to wait. I sat down at one of the picnic tables, took my mask off in the outdoors, pulled out my laptop, and edited that BookTube video catch-up. I wasn't intending to do that right then. I had a book with me, a list of friends who had volunteered to be my support via text, some calm music on my phone, etc. But editing felt right, perhaps because it requires some focus, but not any serious thinking, at least with my simple edits. And most of all, it reminded me in that moment how many friends I've made here on BookTube. Surgery went fairly well, and we were able to return home just a few days afterward. After a long wait for the final pathology results, David and his doctors put together a plan which involves both radiation and oral chemotherapy. He took his first chemo dose on Sunday evening and had his first radiation session yesterday afternoon. The radiation oncology suite is, David pointed out to me today, quite bookish in its own way. His nurses there are named Meg, Beth, and Amy. We don't know the name of the receptionist yet, but we're really hoping she is named Jo. Okay, I said earlier I would read a bit of Alice Walker's introduction to Zora Neale Hurston's Barracoon. Saying the words here takes them out of their powerful context, but I think you'll understand what they meant to me when I read them in the hospital right after David's initial diagnosis. Here is the medicine, that though the heart is breaking, happiness can exist in a moment also. And because the moment in which we live is all the time there really is, we can keep going. It may be true, and often is, that every person we hold dear is taken from us. Still, from moment to moment, we watch our beans and our watermelons grow. We plant, we hoe, we harvest, we share with neighbors. Life, inexhaustible, goes on, and we do too, carrying our wounds and our medicines as we go. Thank you for being here. Take care of yourselves and take care of your loved ones. See you soon here on Hannah's Books.